firms. So why studying a small open economy? First of all, because these economies have an internal market demand that is very limited. They have low barriers to international competitors' entry, and they offer incentives for domestic firms go aboard. On the other hand, why did we precisely choose CMSs? Because they have resource constraints, they need to internationalize to survive, and they display lower survival rates when compared to larger firms. Therefore, this leads us to conduct our research about Portuguese CMSs. With regards to the literature review about internationalization theories, we can find 5 main theoretical approaches that have been used to explain the firm internationalization process. The first one, the theories focusing on multinational enterprises, the stage models, the network approach to internationalization, resource-based approach, and the international entrepreneurship theory. Some of the theories that have been used to explain the multinational enterprises internationalization include the internalization theory, the transactional cost economics, the eclectic paradigm, and the monopolistic advantage theory. With regards to the stage models, we have the Uppsala model, which is the most influential framework used to explain the firm internationalization, and innovation-related models. The network approach is somehow related to the stage models of internationalization, specifically the Uppsala model, because it represents an attempt to update this framework by considering the role of networking interactions in the internationalization process. The resource-based approach represents a more recent approach to the internationalization and tries to develop a dynamic view about the process by using 2 theories, the resource-based theory and the knowledge-based theory. Finally, the international entrepreneurship approach tries to explain the internationalization process of internationalization. With regards to the speed of internationalization, which is the mainstream of this PhD dissertation, the literature highlights 3 main dimensions that can be used to measure that speed. The first one is the earliness of internationalization, that is usually measured as the time since inception until the first international activity. The second one is the post-internationalization space, which is usually understood as the time required to reach a specific degree of internationalization or performance level. And the last one is the post-internationalization speed, which is understood as the speed at which the internationalization process is rolled out since it is underway, so it can be faster or slower. This later dimension incorporates the speed of change in the diversity of geographical markets, the speed of change in the level of resource commitment aboard, and the speed of change in international sales growth. So in this dissertation, we use the earliness of internationalization for accounting the time that the firm needs to become international, and the post-internationalization speed, because the inclusion of these 2 different dimensions allows us to obtain an overview about the speed of the entire internationalization process. Therefore, the problem statement addressed in this research has theoretical and practical issues. On one hand, the main problem in the theory-based aspect of this research is the limited understanding of the timing, speed, and managerial influences in the internationalization process of CMSs. Existing theories, such as the Uppsala model, do not adequately address the complexities arising from managerial thinking and from the changing environment related to the transformative impact of technological advancements, including Industry 4.0 technologies. On the other hand, the main problem on the practical aspect of this research relates to the lack of practical guidance and actionable insights available to practitioners involved in the CMS internationalization. Many practitioners struggle to navigate the internationalization process effectively, especially in the face of macro-environment changes and technological transformations. The absence of clear guidelines on timing, speed, and effective managerial decision-making process poses challenges for CMSs in capitalizing on international opportunities and maximizing their competitive advantage. With such reflections, this dissertation explores the lack of models that relate the managerial cognition, dual network capability, and Industry 4.0 technology with the earliness and the post-internationalization speed, as well as the lack of frameworks addressing the contingent role of the earliness of internationalization on the relationship between post-internationalization speed and performance. Thus, the main objective of this research is to analyze in depth the questions about the speed of the entire internationalization process and its effect on CMS performance. So our original is this research. First of all, we are taking step on a different side by saying that decision makers are not rational. We are taking from the perspective of bounded rationality. That being said, the ultimate cause of internationalization heterogeneity must be the manager, specifically when we have firms operating in the same environment under the same conditions. We also know that internationalization partners are extremely important. Why? Because in CMSs, since they are established, they are really difficult to change. Mixing all of this together, we have a decision maker under really complex terms because making business behind national borders is riskier than doing it at home. It contains additional sources of uncertainty, and host countries can be more ambiguous, but also because the drastic macro environment change brought by Industry 4.0 technologies make international markets more volatile. Under these circumstances, to be international succeed, firms need to develop a dynamic network capability, and managers need to decide how many resources they will allocate to explore and exploit international business opportunities. Considering that the decision maker can be seen as the ultimate cause of heterogeneous internationalization partners, we include cognition into the internationalization decision-making process. Why? Because managerial cognition is usually evaluated through the lens of the dual process theory, assuming that the human brain reaches a decision by using two different systems: the experience-based system X, which is an intuitive information processing, and the analytic-based system C, which involves a rational stepwise information processing. Therefore, we include cognition into the internationalization decision-making process because we are trying to provide additional insights on how decision makers make decisions about the speed of the entire internationalization process to explain the heterogeneous behaviors. This table shows the 6 essays included in the PhD dissertation with the title and the respective research question they are going to address. We will detail these questions later. And this scheme shows the interconnection of each of the 6 essays with the 2 topics of our research problematization. Essay 1 can be seen as the starting point of this dissertation because we provide a review about the topic, about the earliness and the post-internationalization speed. Then, essays 2, 3, and 4 address the first topic of our problematization, while essays 5 and 6 address the second one. So, in the following slides, for the sake of brevity, we are going to briefly explain the theoretical foundations and the methodology used in each of the 6 essays, and then we are going to move directly to the analysis and explanations of results. So, as already mentioned, the essay 1 can be seen as a starting point of this dissertation and addresses the first research question: what are the main research trends on the earliness and the post-internationalization speed? To conduct this analysis, the data collection process involved 4 different steps. In the first step, we specify the search required by using the Scopus and Web of Science databases. We established it as the focus of this review, the earliness and the post-internationalization speed in any type of internationalized firms, such as CMSs, NIBs, Born Global, multinational enterprises, among others. Then, we established the period for analysis that goes from 2000 to 2022. We focused our analysis in full-length articles written in English and published in international business and international management academic journals. And finally, to be included in our review, an article had to contain keywords related to the speed of the entire internationalization process on its title, abstract, and/or keywords. This allowed us to obtain a final sample of 200 articles for analysis. In the second step, we built the codebook for analysis by analyzing the content of each article and grouping them thematically according to the theory, context, characteristics, and methods framework. In the third step, we mapped the field by developing a correspondence analysis, and in the last step, we also conducted a Delphi study in which academic experts were contacted via email and asked to position themselves about the future of the research topic, which allowed us to assess if their reflections were consistent to our review results. The main outcome of our analysis is a proximity map, where the dimension 1 explains around 40% of the variance, and the dimension 2 explains 36%. With regards to the content of the articles, they have been organized considering 5 main issues: the theoretical approaches that are highlighted in red and include the Uppsala model, international entrepreneurship, network theory, among others; the research teams that are marked in green and include performance, strategy, innovation, and digitalization; the measurements and research methods are highlighted in yellow, and with regards to the measurements, we have the speed, pace, and rapidity, that is also known as earliness, and the research methods include quantitative and qualitative ones. The geographical scope is marked in blue and addresses the advanced economies, emerging economies, and least developed countries. And the levels of research are highlighted in purple and include the macro level, the micro level, and individual level of analysis. The first step for the interpretation of these geometrical results involves the labeling of the poles. They should be labeled according to the most extremely located descriptors, but also considering that the most frequent descriptors, the main attractants in each region, exert a pull on closer relationships. So focusing our attention on dimension 1 and looking by the right-hand region of the map, we can see that qualitative methods and digitalization are the most extremely located descriptors, while the main attractants are emerging economies, institutional theory, innovation, and least developed countries. Therefore, we label this pole as digitalization and innovation for internationalization from emerging markets institutional settings. On the other hand, in the left-hand region of the map, speed and performance are the most frequent descriptors, while organizational learning theory, although is not extremely located, is a descriptor that is more distant from the center of the map. As such, we label this pole as the speed of learning and of internationalization and its impact on performance. Moving our attention for dimension 2 and looking for the upper region of the map, we can see that the Uppsala model is the most extremely located descriptor, while the main attractants are micro level, macro level, international entrepreneurship, strategy, and network theory. It is worthwhile noting that the articles included on this region acknowledge that the strategic approaches adopted by a specific type of firm, the multinational enterprises, vary according to the speed of internationalization. Therefore, we label this pole as strategic approaches for internationalization in multinational enterprises. Finally, in the bottom region of the map, digitalization is the most extremely located descriptor, while the main attractants are resource-based view, knowledge-based view, and performance. Accordingly, we label this pole as the performance of knowledge-based and digital-based capabilities for internationalization. On the other hand, we also developed a dynamic analysis of the field to understand how the research topic has evolved over the years. To do so, we split our analyzed period into two sub-periods. The first sub-period was from 2000 to 2012, and the second sub-period was from 2013 to 2022. To perform this analysis, we superimposed the map of the first sub-period on the map of the full period. This allowed us to obtain the trajectories of our descriptors, where the starting point indicates the descriptor position in the first sub-period, while the dot indicates its arriving position at the end of the full period, in 2022. By analyzing this map, two main partners of movements can be identified. The first one is that the descriptors initially located closer to the poles, the performance of knowledge-based and digital-based capabilities for internationalization, and from the pole, digitalization and innovation for internationalization from emerging markets institutional settings, have moved to positions closer to the center of the map and closer to the pole, strategic approaches for internationalization in multinational enterprises. Therefore, these results suggest that ongoing research about the speed of the entire internationalization process seems to balance the analysis of these three different poles. On the other hand, the second finding relates to the pole on the left-hand region of the map, because we can see that it has maintained its respective original position over time. So this means that the research around the speed of learning and of internationalization and its impact on performance has suffered no relevant changes over the last few years. Based on these results, Essay 2 addresses the second research question of this dissertation. How does managerial cognitive reasoning affect earliness and post-internationalization speed, and also addresses the first topic of the research problematization. Based on the literature review, we constructed our research proposal. And what do we have here? Well, usually in the dual process theory, the stimulus is a perception that generates a default response from the experience-based system X. Why? Because it is an automatic and immediate response. And then sometimes the analytic-based system C also intervenes. Typically, perception, the perceived levels of risk, uncertainty, and above all ambiguity, will trigger a response from the system X or system C. However, in our approach, we put managerial perceptions as a consequence of managerial cognition. Why? Because managerial cognition is a trait, so it is prior to the perception of any stimulus stemming from international markets. A manager that mostly relies on the experience-based system X tends to perceive less levels of risk, uncertainty, and ambiguity because this system offers an holistic view about the whole and allows to assimilate everything as similar to what has been already experienced by the manager. So the manager can apply the same schemes and business models of the domestic market in the new foreign market, making the internationalization process faster. However, this only happens when the new international market is very similar to the already known by the manager. as may be the case of culturally and physically close countries. Therefore, we are trying to provide a different approach on the conventional paradigm by assuming that managerial cognition is a trait and not a state, because a state changes from here to here, while a trait is stable. Furthermore, we also assume that the knowledge and experiential learning has an important role in the speed of transition from one international market to the next one. So, to test our research proposal, we have established 3 different criteria to select the cases for our analysis. The first one, the CMSs had to be located in the north region of Portugal. The second one, they had to display a continuing internationalization process and be present in more than one international market. And the third one, they had to operate in the same industry, the footwear industry. This allowed us to obtain 239 CMSs that fulfilled the established criteria that were identified through the variance balance analysis system, the SABI database. These enterprises were then contacted via email and later by telephone to be invited to participate on this study. We developed a qualitative analysis based on semi-structured interviews conducted between July 2021 and May 2022. We interviewed 6 Portuguese CMSs and 11 decision makers. When analyzing the firms included in our sample, we can conclude that companies Alpha, Beta, Delta, Lambda, and Sigma can be classified as early internationalizing CMSs because they start internationalizing within the first 3 years after inception. On the other hand, the company Gamma was labeled as a late internationalizing CMS because this firm took almost 20 years for internationalize for the first time. With regards to the data codification process, we follow a 3-stage procedure. First, we start by reading the interview transcripts to recognize the individual thought unities or the first-order teams. Then, these statements were categorized to identify the subdimensions of second-order teams, such as the experience-based system X, risk perception, and certainty perception, among others. Then, this process continued until we reach a saturation point in which each subdimension was assigned to an aggregate dimension, such as managerial cognition, managerial perceptions, and knowledge and experiential learning. Our results regarding the earliness and the post-internationalization speed have been organized considering the data codification process shown in the previous slide. And these results about our research proposal highlight 3 main findings. The first one relates to the earliness of internationalization, because we found that the decision makers of the early internationalizing CMSs processed international environment signals, the risk, uncertainty, and ambiguity, mostly relying on the experience-based system X. Considering that this cognitive system is automatic and effortless, which accelerates the decision-making process, the result was a faster international market entry. On the other hand, the decision makers on the late internationalized CMS processed international environment signals, mostly relying on the analytic-based system C. Considering that this cognitive system is controlled and effortful, which slows down the decision-making process, the result was a slower international market entry. The second finding relates to the post-internationalization speed, because we found that in both groups of CMSs, early and late internationals, the decision makers combined the use of both cognitive systems to make internationalization decisions, resulting in a more gradualist approach to the internationalization process. So together, our findings suggest why, regardless the earliness of internationalization, the CMSs in the footwear industry cannot be seen or follow a gradual and slower post-internationalization pattern. Most of the sample firms went international within the first 3 years after inception, in 5 of the 6 cases, due to the limited reach of the market if the decision was to stay in Portugal. Therefore, our CMSs cannot be seen as following an NIV or one global internationalization partner. Instead, they are traditional firms which follow an incremental approach to foreign markets consistent with the Uppsala model reasoning. The last finding relates to knowledge and experiential learning because in both groups of CMSs, the decision makers recognized that the knowledge and experiential learning is extremely important to build successful international market strategies that have an important role in the speed of transition from one international market to the next one. In light of these results, Essay 3 addresses the third research question of this dissertation. What specific combinations of managerial cognitive reasoning, dual network capability, and Industry 4.0 technologies influence the post-internationalization speed? In this essay, we developed a configuration analysis to the internationalization process that is based in 4 main antecedents. The first 2 of them were already introduced in Essay 2, managerial cognition, the use of both cognitive systems, and managerial perceptions, the perceived international risk and uncertainty. And now we introduce 2 different ones, the Industry 4.0 technologies, which reflect the managerial willingness or reluctance to adopt this type of technologies, and the dual network capability, which includes network exploitation and network exploration. The main purpose of this analysis is to assess how these 4 antecedents can combine between each other to produce 2 different outcomes. the outcome A, low level of internationalization intensity, and the outcome B, high level of internationalization intensity, which reflect the post-internationalization speed in the short term in a 3-year time frame. The main idea of this approach is related to the concept of equifinality that assumes that each outcome of interest can be equally explained by alternative sets of antecedents, or in other words, by different recipes. Therefore, our analysis was based on a sample of 116 Portuguese CMSs that were obtained through an online questionnaire applied between June and December 2021. Consistent with the theoretical explanations, the level of internationalization intensity was accessed using the ratio of organ sales to total sales, calculating the average of that ratio in the last 3 years, the time frame that goes from 2019 to 2021, and our antecedents were accessed by a 5-point Likert scale using items validated in previous studies. Therefore, our configuration and analysis was performed by means of a fuzzy set qualitative comparative analysis. Our results aggregate 3 different configurations that lead to a high level of internationalization intensity in a 3-year time frame. Configuration 1 combines the use of intuitive cognition to process the levels of international risk and uncertainty in managers willing to adopt industry 4.0 technologies. This recipe also requires the absence of network exploitation, regardless of the levels of network exploration and analytic cognition. So this outcome suggests that the reliance on the experience-based system X to process the existing levels of international risk and uncertainty when managers are open to adopt industry 4.0 technologies will produce a higher internationalization intensity. On the other hand, configuration 2 combines the use of analytic cognition with network exploration in managers also willing to adopt industry 4.0 technologies. This solution also requires the absence of network exploitation and intuitive cognition, regardless of the levels of perceived international risk and uncertainty. So this outcome suggests that the reliance on the analytic-based system C, together with the development of new network relationships to explore international business opportunities, the network exploration, in managers that are also open to adopt industry 4.0 technologies, will produce a higher internationalization intensity. Finally, configuration 3 drew attention for a cognitive, fluent, and balanced decision maker that is able to use both cognitive systems as predicted by the dual process theory. This solution also requires the presence of both network exploration and network exploitation, regardless of the levels of perceived international risk, uncertainty, and willingness to adopt industry 4.0 technologies. So this configuration suggests that internationalization is mainly a context wherein the development of ambidexterity in alliance formation is possible and desirable, especially where decision makers are able to combine both cognitive systems to evaluate international business opportunities to achieve a higher internationalization intensity. On the other hand, our results also show 4 different configurations that lead to a low level of internationalization intensity in a 3-year time frame. It is worthwhile noting that these configurations are not simply symmetric to the ones shown in the previous slide, so they deserve further attention. Configuration 1 combines the use of analytic cognition to process the levels of international risk and uncertainty in managers that are reluctant to adopt industry 4.0 technologies. This solution also requires the absence of intuitive cognition, regardless of the levels of network exploration and network exploitation. So these results suggest that the reliance on the analytic-based system C to process the existing levels of risk and uncertainty in international markets when managers are not willing to adopt industry 4.0 technologies will produce a lower internationalization intensity. On the other hand, configuration 2 combines the use of intuitive cognition with network exploitation in managers also reluctant to adopt industry 4.0 technologies. This recipe also requires the absence of network exploration and analytic cognition, regardless of the levels of perceived international risk and uncertainty. So this outcome suggests that the reliance on the experience-based system X, together with the use of the existing network relationships to exploit international business opportunities, the network exploitation, when managers are not open to adopt industry 4.0 technologies, will also result in a lower internationalization intensity. On the other hand, configuration 3 is very similar to configuration 2, in the sense that also shows a profile of an experiential and intuitive decision maker. However, the main difference between both configurations lies on the role of perceived international uncertainty. This configuration also requires the presence of both network exploration and exploitation, the absence of analytic cognition, regardless of the levels of perceived international risk and willingness to adopt industry 4.0 technologies. So this configuration suggests that the choice of when and how much resources are going to be used in network exploration, which is going to be detracted from network exploitation, is strongly influenced about prospects and expectations about future states of external factors, specifically the contingent uncertainty, the unknown of the international markets that can be addressed with contingent plans. In this configuration, the combination of both perceived international uncertainty and network exploitation created a visual circle that moves decision makers away from internationalization decisions, which somehow explains the low level of internationalization intensity. Finally, configuration 4 also drew attention for a cognitive fluent and balanced decision maker that uses both cognitive systems to process the levels of international risk and uncertainty, no matter whether willingness to adopt industry 4.0 technologies, network exploration, and network exploitation are present or not. So this solution serves a type of a decision maker that, after a careful assessment of new foreign markets, came to the decision that increasing the level of commitment aboard was not convenient or appropriate for its firm in such risky and uncertain context. Based on these results, Essay 4 addressed the fourth research question of this research. What role can the earliness of internationalization play on the managerial micro-foundations of international organizational ambidexterity for Industry 4.0 adoption? It is worthwhile noting that Essay 4 is a different perspective on the same topic of Essay 3. We inclusively use the same sample and data source. Therefore, for the sake of brevity, we are going to briefly explain its main results. And with regards to our proposed model, we found support for 5 of the 6 direct relationships. We found that both cognitive systems have a positive effect on both international exploration and international exploitation. Furthermore, international exploration also has a positive effect on willingness to adopt Industry 4.0 technologies. Only hypothesis 6 returned a different sign to what we have initially predicted, because based on the literature review, we expected a negative effect between international exploitation and willingness to adopt Industry 4.0 technologies, and our results have shown exactly the opposite. They show a positive and significant effect. With regards to the earliness of internationalization, which is the concept of interest and is related to the mainstream of the PhD dissertation, we have proposed the moderating role as follows. In hypothesis 7, we assume that the positive effect of international exploration on the managerial willingness to adopt Industry 4.0 technologies is moderated by earliness, in a such way that the earlier the firm enters the first time on its international market, the stronger the positive effect. On the other hand, in hypothesis 8, we assumed that the negative effect of international exploitation on the managerial willingness to adopt Industry 4.0 technologies is moderated by earliness in a such way that the earlier the firm enters the first international market, the weaker the negative effect. However, our results have shown that neither hypothesis 7 nor hypothesis 8 received support. Not happy with these results, we performed a post-hoc analysis to shed further light on the moderation hypothesis. To do so, we developed a three-way interaction by introducing the firm international market experience as a boundary condition on the hypothesized relationships. Because experiential learning is one of the baseline assumptions in the Uppsala model to explain the firm internationalization. When this third variable was introduced on the model, we found that for CMSs internationalizing earlier, as both international exploration and international experience increase, the relationship between international exploration and managerial willingness to adopt Industry 4.0 technologies becomes weaker, while in CMSs internationalizing earlier, as both international exploitation and international experience increase, the relationship between international exploitation and willingness to adopt Industry 4.0 technologies becomes stronger. This is because this international exploitative behavior is related to a more gradualist and less entrepreneurial approach to the internationalization process. Moving forward, and now shifting the focus for the second topic of the research problematization, Essay 5 addressed the fifth research question of this dissertation. What is the contingent condition in the terms of the earliness of internationalization for the relationship between international experience, post-internationalization speed, and performance? Based on the literature review, we constructed a model to test the link between the firm international experience and the post-internationalization speed with the firm performance measured in terms of profitability by considering the contingent role of the earliness of internationalization. The key aspect of this approach is to assess if the direct relationships can vary depending on different groups of earliness. Therefore, we have classified our CMSs considering the organizational age at the time of the first internationalization, which allowed us to obtain 3 different groups of firms. The early one, firms international at the year of inception, the early 2, firms international at the second year after inception, and the early 3, the firms international at the 3rd year or later. Considering the literature review about the learning advantage of unions, we hypothesize in hypothesis 1 that the impact of the firm international experience in obtaining a profitability above or below to the domestic industry average is moderated by earliness. In hypothesis 2, we assumed that the relationship between the speed of change in international sales growth and obtaining a profitability above or below to the domestic industry average is moderated by earliness. And finally, in hypothesis 3, we predicted that the relationship between the speed of change in the level of resource commitment aboard in obtaining a profitability above or below to the domestic industry average is also moderated by earliness. To test these arguments, 396 Portuguese CMSs were selected from the SABI database, and they were created and internationalized between January 2010 and December 2013, allowing to analyze the first 6 years of post-internationalization. Moreover, we computed the data according to the year of internationalization. Consistent with the theoretical explanations, we included the return on assets to measure the change in post-entry profitability, and the post-internationalization speed was assessed by using two different metrics, the speed of change in international sales growth and the speed of change in resource commitment aboard. It is worthwhile noting that the financial variables were standardized by sector and by natural year, so they will report if the firm is able to obtain an above-average profitability, depending on reaching values above or below to the domestic industry mean. As already mentioned, the earliness is the moderator for analysis, and it was assessed as elapsed years between the first internationalization and the CMS inception. And finally, to test our proposed model, we performed the regression analysis in the status software. Our results have shown that for early 1, for early 2, and for early 3 firms, there is a curvilinear relationship between acquiring international experience and achieving an above-average profitability, which in a time frame of 6 years of post-internationalization can be processed by an inverted U-shaped relationship. So this result suggests that the earliness of internationalization moderates the direct effect in all groups of earliness, and therefore our hypothesis 1 is supported. On the other hand, the results also show that for early 1, for early 2, and for early 3 firms, the relationship between increasing international sales growth and obtaining a profitability above or below to the domestic industry average is not statistically significant. So this evidence suggests that the earliness of internationalization does not moderate this direct effect in any of the groups of earliness, and therefore hypothesis 2 is not supported. Finally, the findings also show that the marginal variation in the level of resource commitment aboard has a positive effect on reaching an above-average profitability, but only for firms internationalizing at the second year after inception. For early 1 and for early 3 firms, the relationship between increasing the level of commitment aboard and obtaining a profitability below the domestic industry average is not statistically significant. So our hypothesis 3 is supported, but only for early 2 firms. Based on these results, the last essay of this dissertation addresses the final research question, that is, can the earliness of internationalization change the direction of causality in the relationship between post-internationalization speed and performance? Drawing up on the literature review, we constructed a cross-leg panel model in which cross-leg terms are highlighted in green to assess whether the earliness of internationalization can moderate the direction of causality in the relationship between post-internationalization speed, which we call successful internationalization, and performance that is measured in terms of profitability. Like in SF5, we have classified our CMSs considering the organizational age at the time of the first internationalization, which allowed us to obtain the same 3 groups of firms. Based on the literature review on the learning advantage of unions, we assumed in hypothesis 1 that the earlier the new venture goes international, the more likely that the current variation of successful internationalization causes a variation of profit in a subsequent occasion. And in hypothesis 2, we assumed exactly the opposite. That is, the later the new venture goes international, the more likely that a current variation of profit causes a variation of successful internationalization in a subsequent occasion. To test these arguments, 1,258 Portuguese CMSs were also selected from the SABI database, and they were created and internationalized between January 2010 and December 2013, which allowed us to evaluate the first 5 years of post-internationalization. Like in SF5, we also computed and listed the data according to the year of internationalization. Based on the literature review, the return on sales was included to measure profitability, while successful internationalization was assessed through the ratio of foreign sales to total sales. The post-internationalization speed is implicit in this ratio because more intensity in the beginning implies more speed. It is worthwhile noting that these main variables were also standardized by sector and by year, so they will report if the firm is able to obtain an above-average profitability or successful internationalization, depending on reaching values above or below to the domestic industry mean in each year of internationalization. Like in SF5, earliness is the moderator for analysis, and it was assessed as elapsed years between the first internationalization and the CMS inception, and then our cross-leg panel model was tested using a structured equation modeling approach. Our results suggest that for firms internationalizing at the first year of inception, the cross-leg effect from successful internationalization to profitability is not significant for any of the 5 years of post-internationalization. So this means that the current variation in the level of successful internationalization does not cause a variation in profitability on a subsequent occasion, and therefore our hypothesis 1 does not receive support for early 1 firms. On the other hand, we found that the cross-leg effect from profitability to successful internationalization is negative and significant from the first to the fourth year after internationalization. So this means that reaching an above average return on sales on the first year of internationalization will produce a below average successful internationalization on the second one. Our results also show that early one firms have a degree of internationalization that is significantly higher when compared to the other groups of earliness included in our sample. However, these results suggest that the initial success of these firms deal with as they start turning back into the domestic market during the early stages of the internationalization process, because the exposure to international competition hurts their position within their home country industries in terms of compared profitability. Therefore, early one firms suffer from a kind of deinternationalization process because they are focused on reducing the intensity of the internationalization process to converge for the domestic industry mean, and for do so, they try to use both markets, the national and international one. However, this is somehow a counterintuitive finding because we found a different sign and direction of causality to what we have initially predicted. For early one firms, we actually confirmed that the direction of causality is from profitability to successful internationalization. On the other hand, for firms internationalizing at the second year after inception, the cross-leg effect from successful internationalization to profitability is negative and significant for the first 5 years of post-internationalization. So this means that reaching an above average successful internationalization in the first year of international expansion will produce a below average return on sales on the second one. Therefore, our hypothesis 1 received support for early two firms, and these results also suggest that early two firms seem to need more time to recover the investment made in international markets. On the other hand, the cross-leg effect from profitability to successful internationalization is not statistically significant for any of the years of post-internationalization. So this means that the current variation of profitability does not cause a variation in the level of successful internationalization on a subsequent occasion. As such, for early two firms, we actually confirmed the theoretical prediction that the direction of causality is from successful internationalization to profitability. Finally, for firms internationalizing at the third year after inception, we also found that the cross-leg effect from successful internationalization to profitability is negative and significant for the entire post-internationalization time frame, and it is even larger from the fourth to the fifth one. So this means that reaching an above average successful internationalization in the first year of international expansion will produce a below average return on sales on the second one. So as verified for early two firms, early three firms also seem to need more time to recover the investment made in international markets because they are investing in exploring new foreign markets, and learning from those markets takes time. On the other hand, the cross-leg effect from profitability to successful internationalization is positive and significant, but only from the first to the second year after internationalization. So this means that reaching an above average return on sales on the first year of internationalization will lead to an above average successful internationalization on the second one. Therefore, our hypothesis 2 is supported, and in an interesting way, we found that early three firms are faced with a two-way causality between successful internationalization and profitability. However, until now, we have been analyzing the short-term causality, also known as Grant-Jassim causality. To assess how these cause-effect relationships behave in the long term for the three different groups of CMSs, we performed a long-run dynamics with impulse-response function starting at the year of internationalization. Our results have shown that for early one and for early two firms, the confidence intervals of the cross-leg effect from successful internationalization to profitability and from profitability to successful internationalization include 0. So this result means that these two cause-effect relationships are not persistent in the long term, neither for firms internationalizing at the first year of the inception, nor for firms internationalizing at the second one. So this empirical evidence suggests that the earliness of internationalization is a source of only temporary but not persistent advantages in the long term. On the other hand, the results for early three firms show that the confidence intervals of the cross-leg effect from successful internationalization to profitability also include 0. So this specific cause-effect relationship is not persistent in the long term for early three firms, but when we analyze the confidence intervals of the cross-leg effect from profitability to successful internationalization, the results show that only the effects of an expected event in the year of internationalization will remain to the next one, although later on the lower confidence interval slightly exceeded 0. So this result implies that the later the new venture goes international, the more persistent the cause-effect relationship from profitability to successful internationalization will be in the long term. Finally, in the following slides, we will provide the answers to our research questions, highlighting some limitations and future research avenues stemming from this research. The theoretical and practical implications of each of the 6 essays can be read in the PhD report. With regards to the first research question, we applied 4 main research trends about the earliness and the post-internationalization speed, specifically the strategic approaches for internationalization in multinational enterprises, the digitalization and innovation for internationalization from emerging market institutional settings, the performance of knowledge-based and digital-based capabilities for internationalization, and the speed of learning and of internationalization and its impact on performance. Regarding the second research question, we can highlight 2 main findings. The first one relates to the earliness of internationalization, because we found that in early international there is a predominance of the experience-based system X, which explains a faster international entry, and in late internationals we find a predominance of the analytic-based system C, which explains a slower international entry. The second finding relates to the post-internationalization speed, because we found that in both groups of CMSs, the decision makers combine and balance the use of both cognitive systems, which result in a gradual and slower post-internationalization partner. The findings related to our third research question highlight 3 different configurations that produce a higher post-internationalization speed in the short term, in a 3-year time frame, and 4 different ones that produce a lower post-internationalization speed in the same time frame. With regards to the fourth research question, our findings highlighted that for more experienced CMSs internationalizing early, international exploitation is more beneficial than international exploration to treasure the adoption of Industry 4.0 technologies. Regarding the fifth research question, we also highlight 3 main findings. That is, the first one, there is a curvilinear effect of international experience on the achievement of an above-average profitability in all groups of earliness. The second one is that the speed of change in international sales growth does not influence the achievement of an above-average or below-average profitability in any of the groups of earliness. And the third one is that the speed of change in resource commitment aboard allows the achievement of an above-average profitability, but only for early 2 firms. The results of the final research question also allow us to conclude that early 1 firms are faced with the direction of causality from profitability to post-internationalization speed. In early 2 firms is exactly the opposite, is from post-internationalization speed to profitability. And in early 3 firms, we have a 2-way causality between post-internationalization speed and profitability. However, this research is not exempt from limitations that open avenues for future research. The first one is that the empirical tests have been conducted in 1 single country. The second one is that our research proposals have been tested in Portuguese internationalized CMSs. Maybe not every finding can be extended for larger firms or for less internationalized CMSs. The third one relates to the database used to collect longitudinal data, because it constrained the number of years included in the post-internationalization timeframe for essays 5 and 6. Therefore, for the future, in the short term, we propose to extend the empirical tests of the models to other geographical zones, and also to test the same models in larger firms and less internationalized CMSs in the search of possible differences. And for the long term, we also propose to select internationalized firms that obtain higher rates of successful internationalization for a period to contrast these models, and also to integrate a factor for the measurement of the speed of internationalization of a sector. The main aim here is to include the macro level and the meso level of analysis. So that is it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Is there any questions for Mark or comments? Online? Questions? Well, I have a small comment.
Okay.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
It was very professional.
Thank you.
It's clear that you are advisor to the work. Congratulations. And in the fact, well, a small comment on multi-rationality.
Okay.
It's not important, but multi-rationality has several things. You assume that the managers knows, but the multi-rationality in the presentation is more or less lack of full information about
the environment.
And this is lack of information on the rationality. Exactly that. I understand that the terms in economics may be different from the terms in marketing. I assume that the also knows this very well, and maybe me, maybe. reach the end.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And, one more time, please.
Yeah. Congratulations for
Thank you.
your presentation. I have a question for you about cross-lab, especially the hypothesis one. And could you please explain why your findings is the opposite for your conditions?
Just let me. I think I don't need it. In the first hypothesis of the cross-leg panel model, we assume that the earlier the new venture goes international, the direction of causality is from successful internationalization to profitability. Why? Because in the learning advantage of newness, this standardization assumes that the earlier the firm goes international, the better the financial performance it subsequently achieves. So this means that a firm that starts internationalizing earlier, when it usually has rigid organizational routines and structures, tends to develop routines that are consequences of operating international. So this means that early internationals are born to run, so they will depart from a low profit situation in the domestic market, and they will need to urgently reach a specific level of international sales on the later stage. So that's why we expected the direction of causality from successful internationalization to profitability. And our findings show exactly the opposite. That is, the direction of causality is from profitability to successful internationalization. So we think that this is related with the constraints on the time that firms need to learn, because the acquisition of learning is not immediate, it's not automatic, so it takes time. Consistent with the Epsilon model, we need time to learn, and then we need to assimilate that knowledge, to apply that knowledge. So I think the explanation for this finding is related to that, to the absorption problem in the terms of learning. But we are trying to explore a little bit deeper that finding, because it's counterintuitive, it's different to what we had initially predicted. So we are thinking about it. Thank you.
More questions? Thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you. Okay.
Professora Teima, bom dia, di Vigo, Lioniana,
Okay.
Felicitações pela sua brilhante, perdão, felicitações pela sua brilhante apresentação. Tenho uma questão a apresentar. Como as medianas e pequenas empresas podem dinamizar a internacionalización do seu negocio se elas se enfrentan ao problema da escasez de recursos e non encontran moitas barreiras para obter crédito xunto da banca?
Okay. I think that one possible way is to develop network interactions, especially with international partners, because they already know the market, so they have a privileged position to the important information for operating that market. So considering that CMSs have that research constraint and the problem of financing, I think that one possible way is the development of network interactions. It's why we included the dynamic network capability in our PhD, in this PhD dissertation, because we think that is a possible way to deal with these resource constraints. Thank you. Thank you.